Chapter 5 of the Opal Serpent by Fergus Hume. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Trouble. "Oh, Debby," wept Sylvia, "he will die, he will die." "Not he, my precious pet," said the handmaiden, fondling the girl's soft hands with her own hard ones. "Them sort of young men have as many lives as tomcats. Bless you, my flower, he'll be up and ready, waiting at the altar before the fashions change, and that's quick enough," added Deborah, rubbing her stub nose, "for there's allays an altering and a turning and a changing of 'em." The two were in the sitting room over the bookshop. It was a low ceilinged apartment, long and narrow, with windows back and front, as it extended the whole depths of the house. The back windows looked out on the dingy little yard, but these Norman had filled in with stained glass of a dark color, so that no one could see clearly out of them. Why he had done so was a mystery to Sylvia, though Deborah suspected the old man did not want anyone to see the many people who came to the back steps after 7. From the front windows could be seen the street and the opposite houses, and on the sills of the windows Sylvia cultivated a few cheap flowers, which were her delight. The room was furnished with all manner of odds and ends, flotsam and jetsam of innumerable sails attended by Aaron. There were Japanese screens, empire sofas, mahogany chairs, Persian praying mats, Louis quartz tables, Arabic tiles, Worcester china, an antique piano that might have come out of the Ark, and many other things of epochs which had passed away. Sylvia herself bloomed like a fair flower amidst this wreckage of former times. But the flower drooped at this moment and seemed in danger of dying for lack of sunshine. That indeed had been taken away by the removal of the young lover. Bart, who had witnessed the accident, returned hastily to tell Sylvia, and so great had the shock of the dreadful news been that she had fainted, whereupon the foolish shopman had been severely dealt with by Deborah. When Sylvia recovered, however, she insisted on seeing Bart again, and then learned that Paul had been taken to Charing Cross Hospital. "They drawed him from under the wheels, miss, as white as a vellum binding as ain't been used. The gent as he was a walking arm in arm with slipped and knocked Mr. Beecot spinning under the steam engine." So did Bart describe the latest triumph of civilization. "He was that sorry in a cold-blooded way as I never saw. He helped to get Mr. Beecot into a cab and drove off. Then I come to tell you." "And a nice way you've told it," grunted Deborah, driving him to the door. "Get back to the shop, you threadpaper of a man. My husband shall never be such a fool. The engagement's off." "Oh, Debby," whimpered Bart, who, strange to say, was fondly attached to the stout servant, but that may have been habit. "Get along with you," she said, and banged the door in his face. "And don't tell master," she bawled after him, "else he'll be fainting again. Drat him for a lily livered duck." So Aaron never knew that the man who possessed the brooch had been run over by a motor or was in the hospital. Sylvia and Deborah both tried to look as cheerful as possible, and schemed how to see the lover who had thus been laid low. Deborah boldly announced that she was taking Sylvia to buy her a new dress. That is, to choose it, for the cost was to be paid out of the servant's wages, and went with her one afternoon to the hospital. They heard that Paul's arm was broken, and that he had been slightly hurt about the head. But there was no danger of his dying, and although they were not allowed to see him, the two women returned greatly cheered. But Sylvia frequently gave way to low spirits, thinking that at any moment the good symptoms might give way to bad ones. Deborah always cheered her, and went daily to get news. Always she returned to say, "He's a going on nicely, and has the color as he might be a sunset." So Sylvia was bright until her next fit of low spirits came. Meanwhile, their attention was taken up by the odd behavior of Aaron. The old man suddenly announced that he was about to sell the shop and retire, and displayed a feverish haste in getting rid of his stock even at a low price. Whether he sold the jewels so cheap as the books, no one ever knew, but certainly the pundit cast did well out of the sale. Within the week the shop below was denuded, and there were nothing but bare shelves, much to the disgust of Bart, who, like Othello, found his occupation gone. The next day the furniture was to be sold, and when Deborah was comforting Sylvia at the week's end, the fiat had already gone forth. Whither he intended to transfer his household, the old man did not say, and this in particular was the cause of Sylvia's grief. She dreaded lest she should see her lover no more. This she said to Deborah. "See him you shall, and this very day," cried the maiden, cheerfully. "Why, there's that dress. I can't make up my mind whether to have magenta or lilac, both being suited to my complexion. Not that it's cream of the valley smothered in rosebuds, as yours is, my angel, but a dress I must have, and your pa can't deny my taking you to choose." "But Debby, it seems wrong to deceive father in this way." "It do," admitted Debby, "and it is. We'll speak this very night, you and me in duets, as you might say, my pretty. He shan't say as we've gone to hide behind a hedge." "But we have, Debby, for 6 months," said Sylvia. "Because I'm a hardened and bold creature," said Deborah, fiercely. "So don't say it's you has held your tongue, for that you didn't, my honeycomb. Many and many a times have you said to me, says you, 'Oh, do tell my pa,' and many a times I have said to you, says I, 'No, my precious, not for Joseph, whoever he may be, drat him.'" "Now, Debby, you're taking all the blame on yourself." "And who have the broader shoulders, you or me, my flower?" asked Debby, fondly. "I'm as wicked as Bart, and that's saying much, for the way he bolts his food is dreadful to think of. Never will I have a crocodile for a husband. But here," cried Deborah, beginning to bustle, "it's the dress I'm thinking of, magenta or lilacs in full bloom. What do you think, my honey pot?" So the end of Deborah's shameless diplomacy was that the two went, not to the inferior draper's where Debby bought her extraordinary garments, though they went there later in a Jesuitical manner, but to the hospital, where her joy Sylvia was allowed to see Paul. He looked thin and pale, but was quite himself and very cheerful. "My darling," he said, kissing Sylvia's hand, while Debby sat bolt upright near the bed, with a large handbag, and played propriety by glaring. "Now I shall get well quickly. The sight of you is better than all medicine." "I should think so," sniffed Debby, graciously. "Where's your orchards with such a color?" "You mean orchids, Debby," laughed Sylvia, who blushed a rosy red. "It's them things with lady slippers a size too large for your foot I'm thinking of, pet, and small it is enough for glass boots, as the fairy story do tell. But I'm a taking up the precious time of billing and cooing, so I'll shut my mouth and my ears while you let loose with your affections, my sweet ones, if you'll excuse the liberty, sir, me being as fond of my lovely there as you is your own self." "No, I can't admit that," said Paul, kissing Sylvia's hand again and holding it while he talked. "Darling, how good of you to come and see me." "It may be for the last time, Paul," said Sylvia, trying to keep back her tears, "but you'll give me your address and I'll write." "Oh, Sylvia, what is it?" "My father has sold the books and is selling the house. We are going away, where to I don't know." "Timbuktu would suit him," snapped Debby, suddenly. "He's trying to get into some rabbit hole. Why, I don't know." "I do," said Paul, lying back thoughtfully. He guessed that Aaron was moving because of the brooch, though why he should do so was a mystery. "Sylvia," he asked, "did your father see my accident?" "No, Paul. He was busy in the shop. Bart saw it, but Debby said he wasn't to tell father." Because of the fainting," explained Debby. "The man ain't strong, though Samson he may think himself, and Goliath too, for all I care. But why ask, Mr. Beecot?" Paul did not reply to her, but asked Sylvia another question. "Do you remember that opal brooch I showed you?" "The serpent? Yes." "Well, it's lost." "Lost, Paul?" The young man nodded mournfully. "I'm very vexed about it," he said in a low tone. "My mother wanted it back. I was going to send it that very day, but when I met with the accident it got lost somehow. It wasn't in my pocket when my clothes were examined, though I asked for it as soon as I became conscious. My friend also couldn't tell me." "Him has caused the smashes," said Deborah, with several sniffs. "A nice pretty friend I do say, sir." "It wasn't his fault, Deborah. Mr. Hay stumbled on a piece of orange peel and jostled against me. I was taken by surprise and fell into the middle of the road just as the motor came along. Mr. Hay was more than sorry, and has come to see me every day with books and fruit and all manner of things." "The least he could do," snapped the servant. "Knocking folks into 'ospitals with his fine gent airs. I saw him out of the winder while you was in the shop, and there he spoke lawdy law to a brat of a boy as ought to be in jail, seeing he smoked a cigar stump and him but a 10-year-old gutter snipe. Says I, 'Oh, a painted maypole you is,' I says, 'with a face as hard as bath bricks, and a bad one you are,' says I." "No, Deborah, you are wrong. Mr. Hay is my friend." "Never shall he be my pretty's friend," declared Debby, obstinately, "for if all the wickedness in him would come out in his face, pimples would be as thick as smuts in a London fog. No, Mr. Beecot, call him not what you do call him, meaning friend, for Judas and Julius Caesar ain't in it with his Beelzebubness." Beecot saw it was vain to stop this chatter, so he turned to talk in whispers to Sylvia, while Debby murmured on like a brook, only she spoke loud enough at times to drown the whispering of the lovers. "Sylvia," said Paul softly, "I want you to send your father to me." "Yes, Paul. Why do you wish to see him?" "Because he must be told of our love. I don't think he will be so hard as you think. I am ashamed of not having told him before. I like to act honorably, and I fear, Sylvia darling, we have not been quite fair to your father." "I think so too, Paul, and I intended to speak when we went home. But give me your address, so that if we go away unexpectedly I'll be able to write to you." Beecot gave her his Bloomsbury address, and also that of his old home at Wargrove in Essex. "Write care of my mother," he said, "then my father won't get the letter." "Would he be angry if he knew?" asked the girl timidly. Paul laughed to himself at the thought of the turkey cock's rage. "I think he would, dearest," said he, "but that does not matter. Be true to me, and I'll be true to you." Here the nurse came to turn the visitors away on the plea that Paul had talked quite enough. Debby flared up, but became meek when Sylvia lifted a reproving finger. Then Paul asked Debby to seek his Bloomsbury lodgings and bring him any letters that might be waiting for him. "I expect to hear from my mother, and must write and tell her of my accident," he said. "I don't want to trouble Mr. Hay, but you, Debby." "Bless you, Mr. Beecot, it ain't no trouble," said the servant, cheerfully, "and better me nor that haughty peacock as ain't to be trusted, says what you will, seeing criminals is a looking out of his eyes, hide one though he may with a piece of glass, and I says—" "You must go now, please," interposed the nurse. "Oh, thank you, ma'am, but my own mistress as is a lady do I obey only." "Debby, Debby," murmured Sylvia, and after kissing Paul, a farewell which Debby strove to hide from the nurse by getting in front of her and blocking the view, the two departed. The nurse laughed as she arranged Paul's pillows. "What a strange woman, Mr. Beecot." "Very," assented Paul, "quite a character, and as true as the needle of the compass." Meanwhile, Debby, ignorant of this flattering description, conducted Sylvia to the draper's shop, and finally fixed on a hideous magenta gown, which she ordered to be made quite plain. "With none of your fal-de-las," commanded Miss Junk, snorting. "Plain sewing and good stuff is all I ask for. And if there's any left over, you can send home as at the same, which I can brighten with cock's feathers, as my mother wore at her wedding. There, my own," added Debby, as they emerged from the shop and took a bus to Gwynne Street. "That's as you'll always see me dressed, plain and homely, with no more trimmings than you'll see on a washing day jint, as I know to my cost from my ma's economicals." "Economy, Debby." "It ain't for me to be using fine words, Miss Sylvia. Cockatoo's feathers on a goose they'd be in my mouth. The old dictionary can do for you, my flower, but pothooks and hangers never was my love, me having been at the wash tub when rising 8 and stout at that." In this way Debby discoursed all the way home. On arriving in the room over the shop, they found themselves confronted by Aaron, who looked less timid than usual and glowered at the pair angrily. "Where have you been, Sylvia?" he asked. The girl could not tell a direct lie and looked at Debby. That handmaiden, less scrupulous, was about to blurt forth a garbled account when Sylvia stopped her with a resolute expression on her pretty face. "No, Debby," she commanded, "let me speak." "Father, I have been to see Mr. Beecot at Charing Cross Hospital." "And you couldn't have my flower do less as a good Samaritan," put in Debby anxiously, so as to avert the storm. "Girls is girls, whatever you may think, sir, of them being dolls and dummies and—" "Hold your tongue, woman," cried Norman, fiercely. "Let me talk. Why is Mr. Beecot in the hospital?" "He was knocked down," said Sylvia, quietly, "and his arm is broken. A motor car ran over him in Gwynne Street. He wants to see you, to tell you that he lost something." Norman turned even whiter than he was by nature, and the perspiration suddenly beaded his bald forehead. "The Opal Serpent!" he cried. "Yes, the brooch he showed me." "He showed you!" cried Aaron, with a groan. "And what did he tell you about it? What the truth, or—" He became passionate. Debby grasped Aaron's arm and whirled him into the middle of the room like a feather. Then she planted herself before Sylvia, with her arms akimbo, and glared like a lioness. "You can pinch me, sir, or give me black eyes and red noses if you like, but no finger on my precious if I die for it." Aaron was staggered by this defiance, and looked fierce for the moment. Then he became timid again, and cast the odd, anxious look over his shoulder. "Leave the room, Deborah," he said in a mild voice. The faithful maid replied by sitting down and folding her arms. "Get your wild horses, sir," she said, breathing heavily, "for only by them will I be tugged away." And she snorted so loudly that the room shook. "Pshaw," said Norman, crossly. "Sylvia, don't be afraid of me." He wiped his face nervously. "I only want to know of the brooch. I like the opals. I wanted to buy it from Mr. Beecot. He is poor. He wants money. I can give it to him for the brooch." He brought out the last words with a gasp, and again glanced over his shoulder. Sylvia, not at all afraid, approached and took the old man's hand. The watchful Deborah moved her chair an inch nearer, so as to be ready for any emergency. "Dear father," said the girl, "Mr. Beecot doesn't know where the brooch is. It was stolen from him when the accident happened. If you will see him, he can tell you." "Not where the brooch is," interrupted Aaron, trying to appear calm. "Well, well, it doesn't matter." He glanced anxiously at Sylvia. "You believe me, child, when I say it doesn't matter?" A snort from Deborah plainly said that she had her doubts. Sylvia cast a reproving glance in her direction, whereupon she rose and committed perjury. "Of course it don't matter, sir," she said in a loud, hearty voice which made Aaron wince. "My precious believes you, though lie it might be. But folks so good as you, sir, who go to church when there ain't anyone to see, wouldn't tell lies without them a choking of them in their blessed throats." "How do you know I go to church?" asked Norman, with the snarl of a trapped animal. "Bless you, sir, I don't need glasses at my age, though not so young as I might be. Church you enjoy, say what you may, you being as regular as the taxes, which is saying much. Lord save us all." Deborah might well exclaim this. Her master flung himself forward with outstretched hands clawing at the air, and with his lips lifted like those of an enraged dog. "You she cat," he said in a painfully hissing voice. "You're a spy, are you? They've set you to watch, to drag me to the gallows." He broke off with a shiver. His rage cooled as suddenly as it had heated, and staggering to the sofa, he sat down with his face hidden. "Not that, not that. Oh, the years of pain and terror, to come to this, to this. Deborah, don't sell me. Don't. I'll give you money. I'm rich. But if the Opal Serpent, if the Opal—" He rose and began to beat the air with his hands. Sylvia, who had never seen her father like this, shrank back in terror. But Deborah, with all her wits about her, though she was wildly astonished, seized a carafe of water from the table and dashed the contents in his face. The old man gasped, shuddered, and, dripping wet, sank again on the sofa. But the approaching fit was past, and when he looked up after a moment or so, his voice was as calm as his face. "What's all this?" he asked feebly. "Nothing, father," said Sylvia, kneeling beside him. "You must not doubt Debby, who is as true as steel." "Are you, Deborah?" asked Aaron, weakly. "I should think so," she declared, putting her arms round Sylvia. "So long, sir, as you don't hurt my flower." "I don't want to hurt her." "There's feelings as well as bones," said Deborah, hugging Sylvia so as to keep her from speaking, "and love you can't squash, try as you may, though bless you, I'm not given to keeping company myself." "Love," said Aaron, vacantly. He seemed to think more of his troubles than of Sylvia going to visit a young man. "Love and Mr. Beecot," said Deborah. "She wants to marry him." "Why, then," said Aaron, calmly, "she shall marry him." Sylvia fell at his feet. "Oh, father, father, I have kept it from you all these months. Forgive me, forgive me," and she wept. "My dear," he said, gently raising her, "there is nothing to forgive." Chapter 5